going to be joined now by Dr. Andy Woods. On Fridays, we like to look at world events through the lens of Bible prophecy and the Middle East. And so he joins us today. He's a pastor. He's an attorney. He is a seminary president. He joins us today. Dr. Woods, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you for joining us.
Brandon, good to be here. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, my friend. By the way, what'd you make? 19 of this letter, post-dated 1954 in the original envelope. And that's interesting.
Well, I mean, to me, it just shows me that communism is demonic. Angels, Luke 20 verses 35 and 36 says, don't die. And we know that there are fallen angels. And these demons have been pushing this communist agenda transgenerationally. So that's why the same issues keep resurfacing. And to me, that's evidence of, you're reading that letter, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Let's take a look at the list of things we want to talk about today. Here they are, guys. Prophecy update, nations against Israel. We're always, some of the bullet points may be the same from week to week, but the information that we share is new under these bullet points. Nations against Israel, globalism, Babylon, Mark of the Beast, technology, Mark of the Beast economy, actually. Let's deal with nations against Israel. Dr. Woods, what's the latest we have on that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. Here's an article on how the IDF has found that Chinese weapons were actually used in Gaza. We believe China is going to play a role in the end times. Revelation 9, Revelation 16. These weapons that were used October the 7th, beginning October the 7th, we've typically blamed that on Iran and Turkey. Well, lo and behold, China, has a hand in it. Beyond that, you've got Turkey sounding off again. Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, has said that what Netanyahu is doing now in terms of rooting out terrorism in Gaza is worse than Hitler. And he's actually running concentration camps in Gaza. So more hatred coming from Turkey against Israel. Not surprising, because Ezekiel 38 and 39 anticipates Turkey as one of the invaders of the end times. And then you have other nations. This is the third article that I have here. Other nations that formerly were allies of Israel, like Canada and Australia. Canada is now on the precipice of turning its back on Israel because of what Netanyahu is doing in reaction to what happened with Gaza. So it's just point after point. You see these nations turning against Israel. That's exactly what the prophet Zechariah said would happen in the end times. The whole world would turn against Israel, and I think we're seeing the stage set for that now.
Yeah, absolutely. We interviewed Itamar Marcus yesterday out of Israel, as we interview also our broadcast partner Aaron out of Israel, and he just testified before committee, European Union committee and commission, as well as for the United Nations, trying to help them understand. What was interesting, Dr. Woods, is he was saying that some of the folks that he was talking to in the European Union had never heard the other side, but they were like, wow. And I was explaining to him, that's why it's so important that we engage people, not just write them off. Because I was saying yesterday, sometimes I get these emails and see them, and my response is, pound sand, I don't have time for this. But I've engaged a few of these people, and what I've found over the course of actually engaging them over several months is some of them have started to say, I didn't know that. I'm not to your full position yet, but I am starting to understand what it is you believe as a Christian Zionist. I'm starting to understand what it is you're saying about the Jewish people. It shows us with Itamar's testimony that, hey, some of these folks in the EU had never heard the truth about Palestine, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, as they call it. That's why it's so important we do what we do and talk about these issues, because this is unknown to many people. We're picked up by so many new platforms now, and we get so many letters, as I was showing that stack of letters at the beginning of the program, and we get those every month, stacks. And the people often say, I wish I had found your organization, your broadcast, your ministry years ago. I wish I had found this years ago, because I've never been taught this. I've never heard this taught before. I was teaching what the Bible, in my series, Twisted Scripture, Twisted Theology, a series I'm going through in our Sunday night church service online at 8 p.m. Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Central Time at worldviewtube.com. And I got an email from someone that I read that said, I've never seen someone take the Bible and explain from the Bible certain things, such as why the Bible does not teach us that we have to be baptized to be saved. Not that it's not an important ordinance or important command and symbolism, but the way you took the scriptures and showed from the scriptures logically and scripturally that salvation isn't dependent on baptism. And then the other things you were describing as you were going, I've never seen anyone do that. Well, of course there are people that do that. You do that, Dr. Woods. There are many other pastors that are listening here. They do that with their congregations. They're real shepherds. They really do that. But I am impressed again about how many people we are reaching, that God's allowing us to reach, that have never, ever been exposed to someone taking the Bible and using it the way we do accurately to talk about salvation, theology, doctrine, end time events, the Middle East, Israel. This is just not done anymore largely in churches in America. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. We've shrunk the Bible's influence to just quote spiritual matters, not understanding that the Bible, as you say over and over again, brings a worldview. It comments on every area of life, economics, emotions, so-called psychology, which is really, psychology is the study of the soul. That's what that word means.
Which isn't ironic, because the secular humanists, as was the case with like Sigmund Freud and so many of them, deny the spirit world, but they wanted to study the soul, the psyche, which they ended up declaring was simply the mind. But yet it really means soul, yet they denied the soul, the spiritual world.
Yeah, it comes from the word suke, soul, which is the Greek word for soul. Ology, coming from logos, meaning read, ology, the study of. But my point is, the Bible is not just a book about how to get to heaven, as important as that issue is. I mean, it will talk to you about economics, finances, debt, self-defense, the countless subjects. And so when the Bible comments on those things, it's just as inspired as when it talks about heaven or hell issues. And for whatever reason, we've taken the Bible and sort of shrunk its influence just to certain spiritual matters. So we kind of in the church today have a canon within the canon. You hear the same texts expounded on every single week, when the reality is God wants the whole word expounded. And when you do that, you'll find yourself as a preacher commenting on every area of life, even on political things. You don't have to bring up partisan, Republican, Democrat, or Trump, Hillary. You don't even have to bring those names up. Just show people what the Bible says about political things, and when they go to the voting booth, they'll know what to do because the Bible has instructed them. And I guess we're just not letting the Bible speak the way it wants to. And so that's why I'm a big advocate of verse by verse teaching. My sermons are already planned for me. It's what's in the next passage. And if it happens to deal with something politically incorrect, like abortion or divorce and remarriage or homosexuality, then my people understand that we're here to let the Bible say what it wants to say. We're not here to correct the Bible. The Bible's here to correct us.
Yeah, indeed. Here's another article, Dr. Woods. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, IDF, Israeli Defense Force, actions in Gaza threaten support for Israel. Canadian Prime Minister supports a two-state solution and rules out Hamas participation in negotiations on bringing about a Palestinian state. Well, I'm sorry. If you are bringing about a Palestinian state, you are negotiating with Hamas, either directly, indirectly. I don't know who you think you're negotiating with, but if you're pushing for a Palestinian state, you are working with Hamas. But what would you expect from the son of Castro? And many say that that's exactly who Trudeau is. His mother had an affair with Castro, and he is the illegitimate child, if you will, of Castro.
Yeah, if you look at two pictures of Castro and Trudeau right next to each other, I'm not going too far into conspiracy theories, but to me they look a lot alike. I mean,
Well,
there's
it's
a lot
known
of
that his mother was friends with
resemblance
him.
between the two. Yeah,
And we have pictures of what is supposed to be Trudeau in Castro's arms, as a kid,
Yeah.
as an infant.
yeah, and the Canadians are just suffering under this man. We actually had some Canadians come and visit our church last Sunday, and they gave me an earful about the transition from Harper, which was one of their former prime ministers, to Trudeau. Harper was a pretty good guy, a Christian as I understand it. Trudeau has moved into, I don't know what to call it other than full-blown Marxism. He was a disciple of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum and Schwab's leadership school and all those kinds of things. And now an edict, it's one of the last articles in the stack of stuff I sent you, but an edict has come down in Canada that all gas-powered cars will be phased out. End of discussion. Will be phased out by 2035. And so, remember how they took down the Canadian truckers?
Yes.
Through banking? Just think what the government could do with those Canadian truckers if everybody's in an electric-powered car and somebody in a smoky back room somewhere has the power to flick a switch and shut your engine off. This is the kind of totalitarianism that's now enveloped Canada.
Let's move into globalism. So the world against Israel. Now let's move into globalism. Here we mentioned this here on our broadcast, and we played the audio the other day. But I want to mention with you, CBS News reporter makes dark prediction of Black Swan event in 2024. So again, I can play it for those who want. Maybe just do it. Here we go. Let me play this.
Well, mine's a little dark. I just feel a lot of concern that 2024 may be the year of a Black Swan event. This is a national security event with high impact that's very hard to predict. There are a number of concerns that I have that factor into that. Not only this sort of enduring heightened threat level that we're facing, the wars in Israel, also Ukraine. And we're so divided in this country in ways that we haven't seen before. And I think that just creates fertile ground for our adversaries like North Korea, China, and Iran. And that's what concerns me most.
Buzz, comment on this, please.
Well, what's interesting about that is it's not coming from some kind of right-wing source. I mean, this is not Alex Jones or somebody like that talking. This is Face the Nation. This is Catherine Herridge talking. So this is like what we would call a mainstream media platform. And she sounds like us. She's warning of what we've been talking about for a long time, this management by crisis philosophy. Create a crisis which enables the heavy hand of global government to clamp down.
Yeah, that's indeed the concern. All right, we'll come back with more with Dr. Andy Wood. I think the global elite are now allowing the media and their mouthpieces to talk about what could be coming. Dr. Woods, there was this movie, as we've talked about, put out by the production company of Barack and Michelle Obama. And it's predicting a cyber attack. Power grid goes down. America's attacked by, it sounds like, North Korea, maybe an Islamic nation, Iran. If you read, if you watch the film, it tells you that it was, pamphlets dropped in Arabic, another one dropped in what looked to be Mandarin or Korean. So you can kind of put the pieces together. But America's being attacked by nations that are against us. Power grid's being hacked. Power goes down. We don't know how, but cyber attack is what seems to be implied. And now we have the media, right on cue, a month later or so from the release of that, talking like this. Whereas before, if you talk like this, people thought you a little crazy, a little over top, extreme, whatever, crazy prepper person. Now it's the mouthpieces of the globalists seem to be warning us. I think some of these people are the mouthpieces of the globalists. There's so much in that film. We saw that the opening scene is of a bedroom with a nightstand on either side of the bed and a mug that has 6. it's 76, but you don't see the 7 because it's in such light color, but you definitely see the 6 standing out. And then a clock that's at 6:30. And then on the other side of the nightstand, you have a digital clock with something in front of it blocking the last 2 numbers, but you see, you don't see the 30 of 6:30, but you see the 6. So when you put it together, you got 666. Now that's not done by mistake. They're sending signals in here. They're mocking us. They're mocking, I think, Christians. I think this is complete mockery in part, but also I think it's symbolism for whatever purpose people can debate. But upon further study of that, there seems to be also some emergency alerts that were put out in that film that show that this event occurred around September 17, September 18, something like that. I'll have to go back and look at the screenshots. But now we've seen screenshots, they're even kind of saying a date. Now, I'm not saying that something's coming in September of 2024, but I find that odd, being I don't think they want us all to go to the polls come November. So I would not be shocked if something happens with the power grid between now and then, or that everything is fine for the most part, but when we get into the fall, look out. And I don't know if that's predictive programming or not. What are your thoughts?
Well, you throw that together with Zuckerberg and these global elites building these
bunkers,
massive underground bunkers to the tune of multi-millions of dollars with an escape hatch. And they did everything they could to prevent the workers from communicating with each other. So each worker on a different part of it didn't know what the other one was doing. So that's all an attempt to keep the whole thing secret. Fortunately, a lot of that has been exposed. And it's not just Zuckerberg, as you reported, but others are building these things. And you have to ask yourself at the end of the day, why would they do that? I mean, what do they know that we don't know? And I think it was Bill Gates in one of those TED Talks indicated that something worse than COVID, is coming and is on the horizon. So we have to understand that George Soros said that people, when they're in a state of fear, will give up. They'll do things they wouldn't normally do, such as give up freedom. And government, by nature, loves a crisis. Rahm Emanuel, of course, don't let a good crisis go to waste, because that's an opportunity for government to grow. And if your agenda is to bring in communism, as you talked about earlier with those cards that you're reading and things, clippings going back to the 1930s, or if your agenda is to bring in global governance, which the Bible clearly says will envelop the earth before Jesus comes back, there has to be some kind of global crisis of some sort to bring in, to dismantle our Constitution, which stands for limited government, and bring in, maximum government. Hitler, with what's called the Reichstag fire, deliberately set a fire and blamed it on his political enemies, and then came in as the hero, to solve, to prevent future crises. So that's an example of, you go to the front door of the house and, well, first of all, the back door, you start a fire, then you come in through the front door and you sell them a fire extinguisher. Then you're the hero when you're the one that caused the problem to begin with. Let's remember that government naturally does these kinds of things. Paul the Apostle in 2 Corinthians 2, verse 11 says, we're not ignorant of Satan's schemes. And there is a scheme, management by crisis, that global totalitarians use over and over again. So why is it so far-fetched to believe a black swan event is coming in 2024?
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's continue. Globalism. Illegal alien invasion maps exposed. This is coming from our friend Anthony Rubin over at Muckraker, who I've interviewed many times. And he is laying out all of these maps, and we've shown them with Michael Yon, Anthony Rubin, Todd Bensman. You got the United Nations, the European Union, NGOs, all helping make sure these illegal aliens know exactly how to get here. You want to comment on this article?
And it's not just maps, it's the fact that they're coming from NGOs, non-governmental organizations connected to the UN. For example, map number 3 was distributed by the United Nations International Organization of Migration, known as the IOM. And so all of these tensions that we're having now with the border, and by the way, most people look at our border policy and they know it doesn't make any sense. If you have to book a domestic flight in the United States, you have to pass through all kinds of metal detectors and everything else to get on the plane. And yet our southern border is wide open. That's illogical. Why is this happening? Well, it has to do with the idea that our political leaders are not taking their cues concerning border enforcement from the American people. They're taking their cues from some kind of transnational, intergovernmental source. And these maps coming from the United Nations and NGOs prove that. They're basically maps telling illegals how to get here, what route to use. By the way, if you get drowsy, don't get on the bus over here, take this other route over there. I mean, it's just meticulous detail in these maps. And so the open border policy that we have now is being internationally orchestrated, I believe, to push America down, because if you don't have a border, you don't have a country, and to sort of absorb us into some kind of region. Maybe the United States, Canada, and Mexico is a region. And eventually that region will be superseded, by transnational government. So all of these things are biblically significant and they're prophetically significant as well.
Indeed they are. All right, let's move quickly now to the next category, which is Babylon. Let me bring up an article here. Babylon, I think this comes from The Cradle. Here we go. China, Iraq begin construction of new city near Baghdad. This is the December 29th, 2023 article. You and I are one of the few people, Dr. Woods, that are holding to the Bible. We're so risky, aren't we? You and I believe when the Bible says Babylon, it means Babylon. Rome, it means Rome. Jerusalem, it means Jerusalem. Israel means Israel. The church means church. And so you and I, in our risky behavior here, are just trusting the Bible to be true. I'm being very sarcastic here because I don't think it's very risky for us to trust the Bible at all. But you and I are one of the few people that say, just wait, be patient, it'll all work out. I'm going to stick with the Bible. When the Bible says that there is some kind of world government out of Babylon, literal Babylon, 58 miles south of Baghdad, I'm going to take that to the bank. And you and I are one of the few people to do it. They go, oh no, Babylon the Great, that's New York, or that's America, whatever. You and I are trusting that it is literally Babylon. And we just keep watching for these articles. Comment on that before you get to the article.
Well, let me do it this way. Pre-1948, from AD 70, when Israel was kicked out of their land until they came back around 1948, everybody thought that the prophecies dealing with Israel and Jerusalem were obviously allegorical. That's obviously speaking of the church. And there's a small cadre of people during that time period that said, no, I think Israel has to become a nation again. Well, you just said it. You give history enough time to unfold, and the literal interpreter is vindicated. Look at Israel today. Look at her wealth, look at her army, look at her power, look at her existence, look at her survival. So everybody now says, well, I guess the literalist was right. What we're suggesting is the same thing is about to happen to Babylon. The word Babylon is used 300 times in the Bible. It's a technical term. It always means a specific city in between the Euphrates and the Tigris. It's the same city where the Tower of Babel once stood. It's the same city that the children of Israel were taken into captivity into. And Bible prophecy indicates that it would have a resurgence. It would become the seat of global authority in the last days. And you have a choice. You can either allegorize it and pretend Babylon means Rome, which is really another form of replacement theology when you think about it. Instead of saying, Israel is the church, now we're saying Babylon equals New York or Babylon equals Rome. It's exactly what replacement theologians do to push Israel out of the prophetic equation. But we're having the same choice now relative to Babylon. You either can allegorize it or take it literally. And the same thing is about to happen. The literalist is about to be vindicated. And this article, is just one demonstration of it.
Don't you love being on the winning side? Don't you love
Not
being on,
always.
don't you, well, not always, okay. But don't you love being on the side that's always going to be proven right?
Yeah, and it's not us, right? It's
Exactly.
God who's right.
That's right.
And God communicates in plain language, and it's not always easy because you're looked at as, I mean, you mentioned earlier with respect to preppers, you're looked at as kooks or extremists, and that kind of goes with the territory. You're looked at as kind of lesser intelligence because you don't understand the nuanced meaning, some hidden meaning that the scholars have engineered. So it's not always easy, but it is very gratifying to say we stepped out in faith. We
To trust
believe
the
what God
Bible.
said. Yeah, and look how history is vindicating us.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the article now. So China, Iraq began construction of new city near Baghdad. Iraq broke ground on December 29th on 30,000 housing units near Baghdad as part of a $2 billion project in partnership with the Chinese firms to build 5 new cities across Iraq. That's what Bloomberg reported on December 29th. The government prime minister is seeking to build 250,000 to 300,000 housing units for poor and middle-class families. The new city on the outskirts of Baghdad will include universities, commercial centers, schools, and health centers, and should be completed in 4 to 5 years. Contracts to build the housing units were awarded to East China Engineering Science and Technology Company Limited and China National Chemical Engineering Company Limited, along with their Iraqi partners, and the names of the company, Shams Al Binal. Contracts to build 4 more cities are expected to be awarded soon, and another 10 will be announced next year, including, that list the cities, including, look at that, and Babel Governance. Babel. Isn't that interesting? Dr. Woods will comment on that when we come back.
And the Tigris, Bab in Hebrew means gate, and El means God. And the Tower of Babel was literally a gateway to God. It was trying to get to God through man's own path. And it took the form of a city. And of course, we know that God was displeased with that project. He confounded the language, preventing the builders from cooperating with each other. And so that project was put on hiatus for a long time. But it's always been Satan's goal to bring the world back under a city and a system located exactly where the Tower of Babel once stood. And here you see the Chinese financing of that city and some sort of, we believe, precursor of that city, which will exist in the tribulation period and will become dominant and will become the seat of the Antichrist empire. So prophecy like that seems so far-fetched, maybe 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but now it's just a regular part of the headlines.
Yeah, indeed it is. All right, here we go. Let's go toward the mark of the beast, technology economy. I paid for everything using cash for 3 months. Here's the problems. And if I had saved money. Tell me about this.
Well, this is an article that goes back to the end of last year, December the 1st, and it's dealing with what's going on in Australia. So Australians wake up one day and they read their newspaper, and this is an article that they'd be exposed to, that cash could be phased out of Australia as early as 2025, which is just next year, 2025. That's not that long. We don't have to wait that long for this one to happen. And we know that the global elites want to get rid of cash. We know why they want to get rid of it. They want to digitize all of our transactions so that they can put us into this sort of Chinese social credit system where you'll be locked out of the economy if you don't behave in a woke, politically correct fashion. It's right out of the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verses 16 through 18. Cash is the enemy, because as long as we're trafficking in cash and doing our transactions in cash, they can't develop an electronic paper trail on us concerning our values and our buying behavior, etc. So they have to digitize all of our transactions. Cash has to be eliminated. So here's this article in Australia. It's going to happen. The article anticipates by 2025. They use the expression in this article, cashless, over and over again. And then the author of the article talks about how it's already being phased out and how she tried to make it through, what does she say here, 3 months just using cash, and she just ran into roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. That's why she said credit cards, are king in Australia. So it's just more evidence that we're moving into this cashless society. It's almost like they've are sort of beta testing it in Australia before they move it out here.
Absolutely. For the sake of time,
in the United States.
let me speed it up just a little bit here. Also, again, I'm going to keep warning my audience. Hyperinflation, I think, is coming. I think hyperinflation is coming. You guys know I told you guys last year to stop using the I word, start getting used to the H word, hyperinflation. And I believe you're going to hear more and more mainstream, and it'll start in the conservative world and then move to the mainstream, talking hyperinflation. But remember, we were one of the first broadcasts telling you years in advance why we believe in precious metals and hard assets and things. What the Bible talks about is real wealth: houses, land, cattle, gold, silver, because they're going to steal your money. That's what inflation is. Remember John Maynard Keynes: by a continuous process of inflation, we can steal the majority of the people's wealth, and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. So keep your eye on that. Cash is difficult for them because they can reset everything by just resetting the digits. That's one reason to get rid of cash. They can reset everything at will. They can constantly be debasing the currency and resetting and creating and everything out of thin air. All right, look, what's this last one here? It has to do with T-Mobile. What's this about, Dr. Woods?
Well, T-Mobile is now assessing penalties for texting certain things. So this kicked in, this policy, in the new year. There's actually a tiered system depending on your infraction, but it basically is going to penalize people financially based on the emails they send and the texts they send. And a lot of these things seem reasonable. It has to do with criminal activity, but right smack dab in the middle of it is profanity. Now, none of us are in favor of profanity, but it also says profanity or hate speech. So you can be assessed a penalty by T-Mobile looking at your texts in order to ascertain whether they contain hate speech or not. Now, what exactly is hate speech? Well, that's a very, vacuous category that the person that comes up with the category is free to come up with the definition. I mean, is hate speech political speech? Is it pro-Donald Trump speech? There's a lot of people with Trump derangement syndrome out there. Would a text promoting Donald Trump, would that be considered hate speech? How about texting biblical passages that Jesus is the only way to God, as he himself said in John 14, verse 6? What about if I send out a text, criticizing Islam, showing the superiority of Christianity over Islam? Is that hate speech? Are my texts going to be regulated? So this is all setting the stage for the social credit system that's on the horizon.
Indeed it is. My guest, Dr. Andy Woods, his website, andywoodsministries.org. Ours, worldviewtube.com. We'll get this up online as a radio show at worldviewradio.com, as a TV show at worldviewtube.com later today. Dr. Woods, thank you for being with us. Happy New Year to you and your family. And remember, we also carry his nightly